Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment when we must pause and reflect on the pressing realities that confront us, not as individuals isolated in our pursuits, but as custodians of the earth we share. Today, I stand before you not just to describe an event or a phenomenon, but to draw your attention to something far deeper, a reality that challenges our responsibility, tests our resilience, and calls for our collective wisdom. I speak of the California wildfires, not merely as a series of destructive flames, but as a message written in smoke, an alarm that demands our attention and action. Fire, in its essence, is not an enemy. It is a gift of nature, a force of renewal and transformation. But when fire becomes untamed, when it transcends the boundaries of balance and harmony, it no longer serves life, it threatens it. The California wildfires are not random acts of nature. They are not isolated occurrences detached from human activity or environmental systems. No, they are the result of patterns, decisions, and conditions that we must examine with both honesty and urgency. Systems of paralysis around the world, injustice that we must examine with both honesty and urgency. The reasons for these wildfires are many, and they are layered. First, consider the climate that has grown warmer and drier. The seasons that once brought rain and renewal now bring heat and drought. The land, parched and weary, becomes a tinderbox waiting for a single spark. These changes are not accidental. They are the echoes of choices made over decades. Industrial activities, deforestation, and the relentless burning of fossil fuels have altered the very fabric of our atmosphere. What we experience as wildfire is in many ways a manifestation of the fires we have kindled in the skies above. And yet we cannot stop there. Human development has marched ever closer to the wilderness, pushing into areas where nature once thrived undisturbed. Homes and communities are now built in zones that are naturally prone to burning. It is not enough to blame the climate when we have, in our quest for progress, failed to respect the boundaries of the natural world. Our growth, unchecked and unbalanced, has placed us directly in the path of danger. But beyond the physical, there is a deeper, more spiritual reason we must address. These fires remind us of our disconnection from the earth, from each other, and from the wisdom that calls us to live in harmony with creation. We have treated the land as a resource to be exploited rather than a treasure to be stewarded. We have seen nature as something to be conquered rather than a partner in the dance of life. And so the earth groans under the weight of our negligence, and the flames rise as both a consequence and a call. What then shall we do? Shall we continue to watch, lamenting the destruction while doing little to change the course of our actions? Or shall we rise with the courage to confront the root causes of this crisis? We must act with urgency, with wisdom, and with a vision that goes beyond our immediate comfort. We must reduce the emissions that fuel the warming of our planet. We must design our communities with respect for the natural systems that surround us. We must invest in the restoration of forests, the protection of watersheds, and the education of a generation that will inherit the earth we leave behind. But above all, we must change the way we see. For the greatest tragedy of the California wildfires is not the loss of homes or even lives, devastating as they are. The greatest tragedy is if we fail to learn, if we fail to awaken, if we fail to heed the warning written in the smoke-filled skies. The flames demand more than our resources. They demand our repentance, our resolve, and our reimagination of what it means to live as stewards of this planet. Let us not wait for the next wildfire to remind us of these truths. Let us not delay until the flames come closer, until the air grows heavier, until the losses become unbearable. The time to act is now. The responsibility is ours. And the future, though uncertain, holds the promise of renewal if only we have the courage to seize it. Before we understood, before we knew. California's wildfires are deeply intertwined with the broader issue of climate change and global warming, which has significantly altered the region's environment and increased the frequency and intensity of wildfires. Rising global temperatures have created a cascade of changes in weather patterns, directly impacting the delicate balance that governs ecosystems in California. So ecosystems in California, as temperatures climb, the state experiences longer and more intense heat waves, which dry out the land and vegetation, creating the perfect conditions for fires to ignite and spread rapidly. This warming trend is not a random occurrence, but a direct result of increased greenhouse gas emissions from human activities, such as burning fossil fuels, deforestation, and industrial processes. One of the most profound effects of climate change is the alteration of precipitation patterns. In California, this has led to irregular and insufficient rainfall, exacerbating already dry conditions. Rainfall that once replenished the land and supported plant life is now less predictable, leaving the soil parched and vegetation vulnerable to combustion. Snowpack in the Sierra Nevada, a critical water source for the state, has also diminished due to warmer winters. Yet, the earlier melting of snow reduces water availability during the hotter months, further drying out the landscape. These factors combine to create an environment where the probability of wildfire ignition and spread increases dramatically. Moreover, the prolonged heat and dryness caused by climate change have extended California's wildfire season. Historically, the state experienced a defined wildfire season lasting a few months, but today, wildfires can occur almost year-round. This extended season leaves less time for ecosystems and human infrastructure to recover, resulting in compounded destruction year after year. The relentless cycle of heat, drought, and fire creates a feedback loop that exacerbates the problem. The anorexia-obsessed childbirth ruled the nation and promoted the idea that exercise saved the human wildfire season and human infrastructure to recover, resulting in compounded destruction year after year. When vegetation burns, it releases stored carbon into the atmosphere, further contributing to global warming and perpetuating the conditions that lead to more fires. The impact of climate change on California's wildfires is not limited to natural conditions. It also amplifies the challenges faced by firefighting and emergency management efforts. With fires becoming more frequent and intense, resources are stretched thin and containment efforts are often hindered by the sheer scale and speed of the blazes. Firefighters must contend with extreme heat, unpredictable winds, and rapidly shifting fire lines, all of which are influenced by the changing climate. Scientific studies have consistently linked the increase in wildfire activity to the effects of climate change. Researchers note that the intensity and frequency of wildfires in California over recent decades are unprecedented in recorded history, providing clear evidence of the shifting environmental conditions. While natural factors such as lightning and seasonal winds play a role in fire ignition, it is the broader, human-induced climate shifts that have set the stage for such catastrophic outcomes. The role of climate change in California's wildfires serves as a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of environmental systems and human activities. The warming planet is not only reshaping the natural world, but also challenging human resilience and demanding urgent action to mitigate its impacts. Drought and vegetation dryness are central to understanding the increasing severity of wildfires in California. The state, known for its Mediterranean climate, is naturally prone to dry conditions during its hot summers, but the situation has been exacerbated by prolonged droughts and changing environmental patterns. These droughts, driven in large part by climate change, have intensified over the years, creating an environment where the risk of wildfires is not only elevated, but also persistent. When drought occurs, it drastically reduces the availability of moisture in both soil and vegetation. Plants and trees, which act as natural barriers against fire when healthy and hydrated, lose their moisture content during extended dry periods. This process transforms living vegetation into highly flammable material, capable of fueling fires with incredible intensity. Dead vegetation, which accumulates during droughts, only adds to this fuel load. Dry grasses, shrubs, and tree branches become tinder, waiting for the smallest spark to ignite. The scarcity of water during drought conditions also places stress on ecosystems, disrupting the natural balance that typically helps regulate fire behavior. In wetter years, natural fires often burn more slowly and remain confined to manageable areas because the moisture in the environment acts as a fire suppressant. However, during prolonged droughts, this balance is lost. Fires spread quickly and unpredictably across vast landscapes, often overwhelming firefighting efforts and leaving destruction in their wake. Drought's impact is not limited to the physical dryness of vegetation. The lack of water also weakens trees and other plant life, making them more susceptible to pests and diseases. Bark beetles, for example, thrive in drought conditions and have devastated millions of trees across California's forests. These dead and dying trees, left standing in drought-stricken areas, become massive fire hazards. When a fire ignites in such a forest, it spreads more rapidly and burns with greater intensity due to the abundance of dry, dead wood. California's drought conditions are also intensified by its reliance on snowpack as a critical water resource. Snowpack in the Sierra Nevada mountains provides a natural reservoir, slowly releasing water into rivers and streams throughout the year. In recent decades, rising temperatures have led to reduced snowfall and earlier snowmelt. This shift means less water is available during the critical summer months, leaving vegetation more exposed to drying out under the relentless heat. The combination of reduced snowpack and persistent drought creates a compounding effect, further heightening wildfire risks. Human activity also plays a role in exacerbating drought and vegetation dryness. Over-extraction of groundwater and excessive irrigation for agriculture can deplete water resources in already stressed regions, leaving less available for the natural environment. Urbanization and deforestation disrupt the natural water cycle, reducing the land's ability to retain moisture. Local communities and towns have starved, reducing the land's ability to retain moisture. These factors, combined with the overarching effects of climate change, create a scenario where droughts are not only more frequent but also more severe, leaving California's landscape vulnerable to wildfire outbreaks. The connection between drought, vegetation dryness, and wildfire risk is undeniable, forming a cycle of vulnerability that amplifies destruction and challenges resilience. Understanding this relationship is key to mitigating the devastating effects of wildfires. Forest management practices play a critical role in shaping the severity and frequency of wildfires in California. For decades, policies aimed at suppressing natural fires have unintentionally contributed to the accumulation of conditions that make modern wildfires more destructive. The concept of forest management involves the strategic planning and execution of activities to maintain the health, diversity, and resilience of forest ecosystems. Interestingly, it dramatically increased in the overall number and scope of forest ecosystems. However, historical mismanagement and the lack of proactive measures have left California's forests vulnerable to catastrophic fires. One of the most significant issues is the accumulation of fuel in forested areas. Over the past century, fire suppression policies have prioritized extinguishing fires as quickly as possible, even those that occur naturally and are crucial for ecosystem health. In doing so, forests have been allowed to grow unnaturally dense, with an overabundance of underbrush, dead trees, and dry vegetation. In a natural fire cycle, smaller, less intense fires would periodically clear out this debris, reducing the fuel load and maintaining the forest's ecological balance. Without these low-intensity burns, the buildup of flammable material has created conditions where fires, when they do occur, burn with unprecedented intensity and spread rapidly, causing far more damage than they would have otherwise. Additionally, forests that are overly dense create competition among trees for limited resources such as water, sunlight, and nutrients. This competition weakens trees, making them more susceptible to disease, pests, and stress, especially during drought conditions. The result is a proliferation of dead or dying trees, which become highly combustible fuel for wildfires. Ushering in the new decade-plus % rainfall, also means an end to the need to rely solely on ancient structures like trees for light. The presence of these weakened forests not only increases the likelihood of fires, but also creates dangerous conditions for firefighting efforts, as dense, unhealthy forests are far more difficult to navigate and control once a fire breaks out. The introduction and spread of invasive species have further complicated forest management in California. Non-native plants and trees such as cheatgrass and eucalyptus are more flammable than native species and have altered the natural fire regimes in many areas. These invasive species often outcompete native plants, leading to changes in forest composition that make ecosystems more prone to large-scale fires. Forest management practices have often been slow to address these changes, leaving many areas at higher risk. Efforts to reduce the risk of wildfires through forest thinning and controlled burns have been implemented in some areas, but remain inconsistent and underfunded. Controlled burns in particular are a highly effective way to mimic natural fire cycles and reduce fuel loads safely. However, public resistance to smoke, logistical challenges, and regulatory hurdles often delay or limit these operations. The second part is that, like many cancer diagnoses, as a result, many forests remain dangerously overgrown and ripe for ignition. Urban expansion into forested areas, known as the wildland-urban interface, has further complicated forest management. As more homes and communities are built near forests, the need to suppress fires becomes even greater, perpetuating the cycle of fuel accumulation. This expansion also increases the risk of human-caused ignitions, adding another layer of complexity to forest management efforts. The challenges of forest management in California highlight the need for a shift in perspective and policy, moving away from reactive fire suppression and toward proactive strategies that prioritize the long-term health and resilience of forest ecosystems. Human activity plays a significant role in the ignition and spread of wildfires in California, with nearly 85% of wildfires directly linked to human causes. These activities range from accidental ignitions to infrastructure failures, all of which contribute to the increasing frequency and intensity of fires in the region. Understanding the ways human behavior impacts wildfire dynamics is essential for developing effective prevention and mitigation strategies. One of the most common causes of wildfires linked to human activity is negligence. Unattended campfires, discarded cigarettes, and improper disposal of flammable materials can easily lead to the ignition of dry vegetation, especially during California's dry seasons. Even a small spark in the right conditions can rapidly escalate into a large-scale wildfire. Recreational activities, such as fireworks displays or off-road vehicle use, also contribute to accidental ignitions. The lack of awareness or disregard for fire safety measures significantly heightens the risk in areas prone to wildfires. Power lines and electrical infrastructure are another major source of wildfire ignitions in California. Aging equipment, combined with high winds, creates a dangerous scenario where power lines can spark and ignite surrounding vegetation. In recent years, several of California's most destructive wildfires, including the Camp Fire in 2018, were caused by electrical equipment failures. These incidents underscore the critical need for utility companies to modernize infrastructure, implement better monitoring systems, and adopt proactive measures like de-energizing lines during high-risk conditions. In Energize, getting utilities to respond more quickly to optimal renewables. Arson, though less common than accidental ignitions, remains a troubling factor in wildfire occurrences. Intentional acts of setting fires can have devastating consequences, especially when combined with dry conditions and high winds. Law enforcement and community education efforts aim to deter such behavior, but the challenge of preventing deliberate ignitions persists. Human development and urban expansion into the wildland-urban interface also increase the likelihood of wildfires. As communities grow and encroach upon forested areas, the interaction between human activity and natural landscapes becomes more frequent. Construction activities, lawn equipment, and vehicle use near dry vegetation can inadvertently spark fires. Additionally, the close proximity of human settlements to flammable areas complicates firefighting efforts and increases the risk to lives and property when fires do occur. Agricultural practices also contribute to wildfire risks. The use of controlled burns to clear fields or manage crops can sometimes go awry, especially if not carefully managed or timed. In windy or excessively dry conditions, these burns can escape control and turn into destructive wildfires. Furthermore, the overuse of water resources for agriculture can exacerbate drought conditions, leaving surrounding areas more vulnerable to fire. Climate change driven by human activity exacerbates these risks by creating hotter, drier, and windier conditions that amplify the effects of every ignition source. The intersection of climate change with direct human-caused ignitions creates a compounding effect, where fires are not only more likely to start, but also more difficult to control and contain. The role of human activity in causing wildfires is both a challenge and an opportunity. While it highlights vulnerabilities in behavior and infrastructure, it also provides avenues for prevention through education, policy changes, and technological advancements. Urban expansion into wildland areas, often referred to as the wildland-urban interface, WI impacts, significantly contributes to the frequency, intensity, and impacts of wildfires in California. As populations grow and communities spread into regions that were once undeveloped, the interaction between human settlements and natural landscapes becomes more frequent, creating a dynamic that amplifies both the causes and consequences of wildfires. Wildfires become more frequent while people more prepared, and amplifies the dynamic that amplifies both the causes and consequences of wildfires. But safety, the expansion of urban areas into wildlands brings homes, infrastructure, and human activity closer to fire-prone environments. Many of these areas are characterized by dense vegetation that, when dry, becomes highly flammable. Building homes in these regions inherently increases the risk of wildfire ignition, whether from natural sources like lightning or human activities such as electrical malfunctions, vehicle use, or outdoor equipment. The proximity of flammable structures to natural fuels means that once a fire ignites, it can quickly spread between vegetation and human developments, escalating the scale of destruction. This expansion also complicates firefighting efforts and risk management. In less developed regions, wildfires may burn without threatening lives or property, allowing natural processes to take their course. However, in the WUI, fires become emergencies requiring immediate intervention to protect homes, infrastructure, and human lives. The presence of communities in these areas often leads to aggressive fire suppression efforts, which, while necessary for safety, can contribute to long-term risks by preventing natural fire cycles that would otherwise reduce fuel loads. Over time, this results in an accumulation of dry vegetation, making future fires more intense and harder to control. The design and construction of homes and infrastructure in the WII often fail to account for the unique challenges posed by wildfires. Many structures are built with materials that are not fire-resistant, and landscaping choices frequently include highly flammable plants and trees. In some cases, homes are constructed without adequate defensible space, leaving little buffer between structures and surrounding vegetation. Such spaces all too often can trap the lobsters and fish and destroy large numbers of plants and nutrients inside the home. This lack of preparation increases the vulnerability of these communities, making it more likely that a wildfire will cause widespread destruction once it reaches the area. Urban expansion into wildlands also places additional stress on emergency response systems. Firefighting resources are often stretched thin, as agencies must balance protecting structures with containing the wildfire itself. Evacuation efforts become more complex in densely populated WUI regions, where limited road access can lead to congestion and delays during emergencies. The growing population in these areas also increases the human cost of wildfires, as more lives are placed at risk when fires occur. The environmental impact of urban expansion into wildlands further exacerbates wildfire risks. Development often involves clearing vegetation and altering the natural landscape, disrupting ecosystems and making them less resilient to fire. Additionally, human activity in these areas, such as outdoor recreation, power line installations, and land management practices, increases the likelihood of accidental ignitions. Compounding these challenges is the fact that urban expansion into the WUI often occurs without sufficient planning or regulation to mitigate wildfire risks. Zoning laws and building codes may not require fire-resistant materials or defensible space, leaving new developments ill-prepared for the inevitable occurrence of wildfires. As the population in these areas continues to grow, the risks associated with urban expansion into wildlands will only intensify, making it essential to address this issue with foresight and comprehensive planning. The Santa Ana and Diablo winds play a significant role in the rapid spread and intensity of wildfires in California, particularly during the dry and fire-prone seasons. These seasonal winds are unique to specific regions of California, and when combined with the state's natural fire conditions, high temperatures, dry vegetation, and low humidity, they create an almost perfect storm for destructive wildfires. The powerful gusts of wind significantly amplify the effects of wildfires, allowing flames to spread quickly over long distances and making containment efforts exceedingly difficult. The Santa Ana winds primarily affect Southern California, while the Diablo winds are prevalent in Northern California. Both wind patterns are characterized by their dry, hot air originating from inland deserts, moving rapidly toward the coast with little to no moisture content. As these winds sweep across the landscape, they accelerate fires, carrying embers and flammable materials over vast areas and into populated regions. The extreme gusts can push flames into areas that would otherwise be less vulnerable, transforming localized fires into large, uncontrollable wildfires. The combination of strong winds and dry conditions creates a self-sustaining cycle that amplifies the spread of wildfires. When fires ignite, the wind-driven air movement pulls oxygen into the flames, intensifying combustion and causing fires to grow exponentially. The gusts also lift burning embers into the air, which can travel significant distances and create spot fires ahead of the main fire front. This effectively creates multiple ignition points, forcing firefighters to divide their resources and efforts across various hotspots, making containment nearly impossible in some cases. Additionally, the winds contribute to erratic fire behavior, creating unpredictable fire paths. Firefighters often face unpredictable fire spread as winds shift direction suddenly, altering the fire's trajectory and making it more dangerous to predict and control. Structures, vegetation, and other natural barriers become insignificant in the face of these powerful winds, as flames can leap over these obstacles with ease, pushing further and faster. In areas affected by Santa Ana and Diablo winds, fire intensity is significantly higher compared to regions without these wind patterns. The gusty conditions create extreme fire environments where heat levels soar, fuel consumption is rapid, and the potential for embers to ignite distant fires is greatly increased. As a result, fires under the influence of these winds are not just local phenomena, but regional emergencies, requiring extensive coordination and resources. The impact of these winds is further compounded by the fact that their occurrence can span several days or even weeks, providing ample time for wildfires to burn uncontrollably. During this period, emergency management efforts are stretched thin, and the risks to both human lives and infrastructure increase dramatically. End quote. The unpredictable nature of wind-driven fires makes them one of the most challenging types of wildfires to mitigate, requiring advanced fire management techniques and technology to monitor and predict fire behavior. In addition to the dangers posed to ecosystems and human communities, the presence of these winds also places immense strain on firefighting resources. Firefighters must work tirelessly in extreme conditions, often battling fatigue and physical stress in efforts to control fires. Tools and equipment become less effective in high-wind environments, and the ability to establish fire breaks or controlled burns becomes nearly impossible. As the so-called firefighter's burn becomes nearly impossible, as temperatures climb more than 1,000,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Overall, the Santa Ana and Diablo winds serve as a critical factor in understanding the rapid and destructive nature of wildfires in California. Their contribution to fire behavior highlights the need for integrated fire management approaches that take into account both natural and human-made influences on wildfire dynamics. Without addressing the role of these powerful winds, the challenges of wildfire management in California will continue to grow more complex. The lack of ecosystem resilience in California's forests and natural landscapes has significantly contributed to the increasing severity of wildfires. Resilient ecosystems are those that have the capacity to recover and thrive despite disturbances such as fire. However, in many regions of California, natural fire cycles have been disrupted, and ecosystems have become more vulnerable to destructive wildfires. Several factors contribute to this reduced resilience, including deforestation, habitat fragmentation, invasive species, and climate change, all of which exacerbate the challenges faced by ecosystems in withstanding and recovering from wildfires. One of the primary reasons for the diminished ecosystem resilience is the historical disruption of natural fire regimes. For centuries, many California ecosystems thrived with a natural cycle of low to moderate intensity fires. These fires played a crucial role in clearing out excess vegetation, reducing fuel loads, and promoting healthy forest regeneration. However, the advent of fire suppression policies in the early 20th century disrupted this cycle, leading to the accumulation of dead and decaying vegetation. This accumulation of fuel has made contemporary wildfires far more intense and difficult to control, as ecosystems are no longer adapted to withstand such extreme fires. Through social control and centralized systems like GDPR, other greenhouse gas emissions reduce, and more flame reduction brings increased extreme fires. Another factor impacting ecosystem resilience is habitat fragmentation caused by urban expansion and industrial activity. As natural landscapes are broken into smaller, isolated patches, ecosystems become less able to maintain biodiversity and ecological function. Fragmentation limits the ability of species to migrate, adapt, and interact with other ecosystems, weakening the overall stability of these areas. Fragmentation limits the overall stability of these areas. With fewer species and limited natural processes to regulate vegetation, ecosystems are more prone to unchecked growth of invasive species, which further lowers their resilience to wildfire. Invasive species have emerged as a major threat to the natural balance of California's ecosystems. Non-native plants often outcompete native vegetation for resources like water, sunlight, and nutrients, creating dense, homogeneous landscapes that are more susceptible to fire. These species, such as cheatgrass and invasive shrubs, typically grow rapidly and produce higher quantities of flammable material, increasing the likelihood of severe fires. The lack of diversity in these ecosystems impairs the natural controls that help limit fire spread and intensity. Climate change also plays a significant role in reducing ecosystem resilience by altering temperature and precipitation patterns. As droughts become more prolonged and intense, ecosystems struggle to maintain their health. Dry conditions create a vicious cycle where vegetation becomes more flammable, thereby increasing the risk of fires. Warmer temperatures exacerbate this issue, accelerating the drying process and reducing the ability of ecosystems to recover after a fire. This has led to a reduction in the natural regeneration capacity of forests and landscapes, making them more vulnerable to future wildfire events. Furthermore, human activities, such as logging, mining, and recreational use, have also contributed to the degradation of ecosystems. These activities often disrupt the soil structure, reduce biodiversity, and promote the spread of invasive species. Unsustainable land management practices, particularly in the context of wildfire-prone areas, have weakened ecosystems' natural defenses against fire. In order to improve the resilience of ecosystems, a comprehensive approach that integrates sustainable land management, habitat restoration, and fire-adaptive strategies is required. This involves reducing fuel loads through controlled burns and thinning, promoting biodiversity, and preserving natural habitats that support a wide range of species. By restoring the balance between fire and ecosystem health, California can move towards more resilient landscapes capable of withstanding and recovering from wildfires. This is where the wildlife returns end. California's wildfires are driven by a complex interplay of factors, including the impacts of climate change, human activity, inadequate forest management, and the influence of natural elements like winds. Each contributing factor, whether it be prolonged drought, dense vegetation buildup, the role of Santa Ana and Diablo winds, or the expansion into wildfire-prone areas, intensifies the challenges faced by the state in managing and mitigating these destructive fires. To address these challenges, it is imperative to adopt a holistic approach that incorporates sustainable land management, proactive fire prevention strategies, and community resilience building. Forest management must move beyond reactive suppression and focus on restoring ecosystems through thinning, controlled burns, and habitat restoration. Additionally, addressing the role of human activity in igniting wildfires through education, better infrastructure, and fire-resistant building practices will play a crucial role in reducing future risks. Ultimately, the resilience of California's landscapes depends on a collective effort from both the government and communities to embrace innovative and adaptive solutions that balance ecological health with human development. By understanding and mitigating the multifaceted causes of wildfires, California can foster a more sustainable and fire-resilient future. Thank you.